19th of November. This is the Finance Committee meeting. Mike and Angela, I'm going to turn it over to you. We can get started. Take the lead.
The general fund expenses for the month of October have totaled 19.4 million as compared to 13.2 million
Can you
for the
repeat the
same.
booking on? Yeah, is there a way to show, put it on the screen? Or?
Oh, Ken, can you put that up? Thank you. It would be the second page. Thank you. As compared to 13.2 for the same period last year. A significant portion of the difference is due to the pending adjustment to benefits. That would be October actuals that need to be booked. And we will be booking November as well. In addition, October salary expenses contain 3 full pay periods this fiscal year compared to last year. We had 2 full pay periods. General fund expenses for the fiscal year to date total 38.5 million with an additional 100.9 million encumbered. The annual operating budget for the general fund is 172 million, which leaves a fund balance of 33 million and equates to 19% of the budget. As the year progresses, we anticipate additional items that become encumbered and drive the balance downward toward a break-even point. There will also be additional expenses that the district will incur and will not be encumbered, therefore will lower the balance fund. So in October, we moved staff who were assigned to the Alliance grant from the general fund to the grant. And we did this because the grant was approved. And that was the time for us to start moving staff members. Outsourcing of professional services are offset by the para and SPED unfilled positions. And the outsourcing we do is Stepping Stone and the Nurses Network. The encumbrances are being entered for transportation for the school year. That would be STA. We just received the November invoice, so we will be encumbering the balance December through June. And the McKinney-Vento transportation has been already encumbered. Reclasses will continue to be made for items miscoded, and POs are being looked at and adjusted to be more in line with the actuals. For other professional services, pupil transportation, STA requisitions will be entered in the system, and this is done in November. We also reviewed the PO for under public liability insurance, which was for the BOE lap payment. And it was determined that the information given out was a little too aggressive, so we've decreased it to bring it in line with the actuals. Purchase services, we reclassed a rental invoice that was coded to the wrong account and moved it back into the rental account. Under supplies, gasoline, the PO was reduced to be in line with the district charges. Other supplies, we have an account that is not budgeted, and that is due to the fact that there were other supplies we needed to order for the cafeteria at DH West. And these purchases could not be paid out of the school lunch account because DH West is a new building. So the general fund had to pay for these expenses. And again, I say they were non-budgeted items. So if we go on to page 2, we have been adjusting many of the accounts. We're still working on the negative balances, and next month you will see the adjustments we made. If we look at media specialists, these media specialists were just recoded to the 7.7 grant, the ARPA grant. Also coaches were reclassed to that account as well. We've also reclassed some items out of professional services. We have a temp that's in working with us, CLA, Twin Lakes. These items have been reclassed to the Alliance grant because they were written in the grant. Let's see. We will be reclassing Title I when the grant is approved. There's a few salaries there that need to be moved over to the grant. So there's nothing else to discuss on salaries.
Angela, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
On the $2 million negative variance on the line teaching ESL and
Teaching, oh, ESL bilingual.
right, and the line above that.
And we have regular and then special ed.
Yeah, the $8 million, right, the
Yep.
$8 million positive variances are, did I understand you to say that on the ESL, that would be reclassified next month to the ARPA money?
I'm still gonna look at that one
Oh, okay.
to make sure that the right people are in there because of the title ESL bilingual and should not be anywhere else. So that's on a list to be looked at.
And in general, so that we understand the expenses that we have, charged to the general fund. This point here, let's specifically say on the Alliance, have not all been moved out because the grant has just been approved. Am I correct?
Yeah, it's Rich. It's kind of unfortunate the timing of the grants happen, after we set the budget.
Right.
Mike, I could speak a little bit to that. Hi, this is Kara, everybody. I'm still commuting to my house here. The grants, all go through the state approval process. So what the general overall number is. The programming of the grants and the acceptance of the strategies are state approved. And so it's a chicken or the egg, which comes first. And so we try to position ourselves so that we know generally how much we will be putting in salaries. But sometimes the state will come back and ask you to revise or say something is not approved. So we usually wait until we get final approval. And then we will have, as part of the packet tonight, I believe the Alliance is in there, so you could see the categories and the line items. But the grants come in, sometimes late summer. In this case, Title I was very, very late, as you recall, with the state. So a lot of our title grants come late. And so it's an ongoing process for us. IDA sometimes is in the middle of the school year. So things happen mid-year. So we'll always be in a process of some level of staff movement, although I think, after this year, given that we're not going to see any large adjustments in Alliance, for instance. This year we went up $9 million. It was a sizable increase that causes a tremendous amount of back end movement in our financial system, and then juxtaposing those against Title I, Title II, bilingual. So there's an ongoing effort to keep up with that process. I do think it'll be less. ARPA, for instance, the one-time money from the city, there are salaries associated with that'll be charged off to that one-time funds. That money, once those staff are moved over to that grant, which is happening right now, that money then is freed up in the general fund. And so, all of that movement needs to be reanalyzed. Again, we have a pretty good sense of where it's going to land. But as Mike and Angela and I have met, there's going to be a need with all the movement with the grants and the one-time funds to probably allocate some of the budget. So whereas we have some negative variances and we have more money in maybe perhaps salaries and or benefits to redistribute so that we can appropriately spend down the money in areas of need and make sure that things are on the correct line.
As of the closing of October and the preparation of the October statements, was the Alliance grant approved? And I'm assuming that all of the adjustments have not been made relative to taking it out of the Alliance fund or from Alliance to general fund, whichever way you have to go. I'm assuming that that's still a work in progress.
Yes, that is.
Is that correct?
Mhm.
Okay.
And also,
Mr.
in
J?
this- Go ahead.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Right. So, okay. So you've answered my question. Okay.
Two things. I just want to let you know, Julia's on the call with us. And then I just want to ask a quick follow-up question about the media specialists and coaches, which Angela, you mentioned are
Yes.
reclassed to the ARPA fund grant. Dr. Casimiro, as far as those positions are concerned, obviously those are one-time funds. So do you expect we're going to be able to move them back to the general fund next year or perhaps within the Alliance grant?
I do. So what happens with this, for as appreciative of as we are as any one-time fund, we have to keep the lights on and keep things going. It does create a conundrum for us because as we do have to move. It'll create a one-time amount of money that's available to us right now, because as we move these staff out into ARPA, those funds come back into general fund. So I'll have some one-time funds that are set aside for salary, but I can't spend it on permanent people because I would either have to, reduce by whoever we hired or the folks that moved into the one-time fund column. So we want to make sure that we're not over hiring, if you will. So we should be okay with the staff that are in that grant. It really all depends on, other factors at budget time. And as we plan for and project out our needs for, let's say, opening up the last phase of the academy and so on and so forth. So right now, I think we're okay. We just have to be mindful of once all of these movements, these changes are done, to project out appropriately. What do we have for one time that we can spend this year, and do that efficiently before the end of the fiscal year, and then make sure that we have a pocket left to absorb the staff that have slid over into that one-time fund. There's more than just the media specialists and the coaches. There was a couple $1 million worth of, if you looked in the budget book, you'll see like DHS enrollment. And so we have a couple $1 million of Danbury High School staff in there as well. So there's a sizable amount of funds that we'll need to account for in the next year's budget. One of the things that we're advocating quite aggressively for right now is, and we'll talk about this in the next board meeting, is the need to have cost of living and or inflationary increases in Alliance. in that ECS pocket because, we're all going to feel that heat again this time next year when that grant does not continue to grow with us as it has been for the last 5 or 6 years.
Thank you. Can I ask one follow-up, Mr. J?
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Dr. Casimiro, are there restrictions for the use of the ARPA funds?
So the ARPA funds, there are restrictions. Yep, there are definitely restrictions. We have to spend them in the way that they were, in the way that we have written them. So we can't change what was written at the time that we laid that grant was, the foundation for that grant was laid. So we have technology and infrastructure for students. That's in there. We'll have no problem spending that, and we've already have started working on that. And then the other component was staffing. And so, the ARPA had to be spent over the course of 2 years. The expiration, we were able to withstand and not use a good portion of it last year. And we tried to, not knowing how much these academies were going to cost to open and how much we were going to get from the city, we really held tight to say, if we can kick this off to the next year, if we need it, that would be probably better or more needed the following year. And that would be this, the year that we're in now. So, yeah, we're actively have to spend it in line with how we've written it. So DHS enrollment, we had media specials in there by name, name as in category, meaning media specialists, not individual names, and then instructional coaches. So there's flexibility with which staff at DHS, those types of things. But we had to spend it on the staffing as it was outlined in the application.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and there's some incremental, incidental things in there. There was a little bit of money for the audit. There was a little bit of money for a few other smaller things there, but the bulk of it was the salaries.
Is it possible, Mike and Angela, that within the next 2 reporting cycles, that I'm assuming a good part of your adjustment for the reclasses will be made, that in addition to the regular schedules that are presented that we're looking at here, can you present a schedule indicating the ARPA funds so we know how much is in there and by category? So we have an idea of the expenditures that are in there. And talk to those points.
In ARPA, Mr. Janelle, you're talking about in the ARPA grant?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So if we can have a supplemental, accounting, a supplemental accounting, a supplemental statement saying, okay, this is all for X number of dollars, whatever the balance is, and the expenditures that we have or anticipate to use is X number of dollars for salaries, transportation, et cetera, so that we have some understanding as to where the line numbers and the expenses are for that. And then as the year moves on, you can determine at that point where there may be a fall short, in terms of expenses, since it's one-time funding, and perhaps we use this, in terms of the recurring expense that we're going to have to absorb this the following year. But what I would like to see in summary is a statement for the utilization of the ARPA money.
Okay.
With that.
Yep.
But the other point I want to make clear, would I be correct in saying within the next 2 cycles, the reporting cycles, that a good part of your adjustments will be made so that we have a better understanding at that point where we are to then drill in and discuss any variances without having to say, well, this particular line number is still under consideration because we believe it should be charged here. What I'm trying to do is eliminate all of that so that we prevent this moving target, so to say, of the workload you have to make this adjustment so that we're pretty much finalized to the point, knowing that it'll never be finalized, but if we get to a 95% situation, then we can look at the statement and start to drill down and say, all right, this is where we are, what concerns do we have, et cetera. Is that reasonable to say that within the next two financial periods, that is November and December, that this could be completed?
Yes, that's
Don't see
reasonable.
why not.
All right. It makes it awkward to go through and to comprehend where I find it, where we are because of pending adjustments. It's detailed enough and complicated enough when it's correct, much less too convoluted with adjustments that have to be made. It just wastes a lot of time and creates issues as to where we may have particular issues in terms of overspending or underspending because the reporting is not clean. Only it's not clean due to the adjustments you got to make to put stuff on the grant.
Okay.
Are there any other categories other than salaries that you feel we should go through that, well, let me put it this way. Throughout the statement that's presented here, I'm sure the explanations of adjustments are going to apply to almost every category, being some items within that category being adjusted to some grant or something else. What I'm getting at this point here, based on your day-to-day working knowledge, are there any issues that you can foresee right now that would raise a red flag to us indicating that we have a potential problem in terms of maybe not budgeting enough relative to the way you see the expenses coming in? Or, is it possible that we have a large excess that we over budgeted and we could utilize someplace else? So at this particular point, are there any red flags, positive or negative, that you could speak to that we should be concerned about?
To be honest, I'm always worried about special education just because some of the placements that come in can be kind of costly and are very difficult to determine kind of until they happen. I know we had one last year that we were able to absorb, but it was still a substantial amount. I think it was 500,000 or so. So I always keep my eye on that.
But as you mentioned last year when we had that, you highlighted that just to say that with this particular edition, there could be additional expenditures. So, I understand you don't have a crystal ball, and that's always a moving target of uncertainty. So,
Richard, if I may just jump in, just one thing we also started to talk about is, while we are in better shape with having our classroom staffed this year than we were last year, we had a hard time getting even agency staff to fill. We are still heavy in agency staffing. And so what that means is we budget for health insurance for all staff expected to be hired. However, we're, the contract, for instance, with the paras are very, while we're not hemorrhaging, we're not losing paras as we were before, where it was kind of a vicious cycle there of losing people and having a difficult time hiring. We're not losing as many folks, but we're still not attracting as many because the rates got better, but they're still, not as competitive. But we're getting better, but we still have a lot of agency staff as a result of that still issue with persistent vacancies in key areas. So, we are going to have to analyze, we're a couple months in, but you know, there does need to be an analysis on the actuals that we're spending on health. And for folks that we are going to make a determination, it's that they're not likely to be hired from, you know, this year. How do we readjust and reallocate some of that potential money on the health side? Because we're going to need to, you know, appropriately have a plan to spend that money or to redistribute to other areas of need.
Sure.
So we do need to be reactive to that, and that's work that's ongoing.
And to your point, you've explained, an example of to what I was talking about. In the case of analyzing the potential needs on the staffing, the contra expenses would be the benefit portion of it. But as time goes on, you still have to fill those positions, on a day-to-day basis. So it may be that the actual expense relative to benefits are low, but I'm not saying equally offset, but there is a cost offset in another line number, being the agency fee and stuff like that, until we balance things out and get a little bit more stable. So I
Correct.
understand that, and that's what I was talking to in terms of once the statements are a little bit cleaner, you're able to see that and focus in on those particular items because they would stand out, like a sore thumb, as opposed to
Sure.
having so many other items stand out as
Sure.
a function of adjustments that are necessary, which makes
Sure.
it very complicated to.
Right. And in addition to that, Richard, we're negotiating 5 contracts right now, some of which calls for retroactive language. So, dating back to July 1st. So there are some other things to, that are to be considered as,
Sure.
in terms of other expenses. So there's a lot of trains that have to pull into the station at the same time and to get that forecast. And that's what's being worked on. But also, we need all that information nailed down so that we can plan an appropriate budget for 27 fiscal year.
Right. And one of the thoughts I have, you can consider this, is in the future, is to, and it may be just short term, but to the future, being the 2 accounting cycles coming due. But in terms of the narrative, Mike and Angela, if you can preface the narrative to say that, we're basically still is a work in progress on the adjustments. So many of the variances that you're looking at, and you can cite a few as examples, are a result, not necessarily of us being in a overspent position, but still has to be transferred to other cost centers. So that at least the reader, when they read the narrative and then look at the report, can make a relationship to understand why the variances are shown as they are, positive or negative, that there's still work to be done and it's a work in progress. So, I think that's important to alert the reader up front. And then at this point here, that us as a board or a committee just understand what point in time will pretty much just come to an end so that we can have truthful conversations on where we stand. Doesn't do us any good to have May and June when the year is over.
I think that's a really good point. And something I was looking at these variances is I don't know that we've ever had a threshold for variance analysis, being that we never had a variance analysis in depth. What would the board be interested in seeing as a threshold? For example, any variance over a certain percentage or dollar value?
I'm not sure, if that's something we can talk about, or you could make a recommendation. You're talking about $172 million in terms of a budget. So, what do you find as material? But, I think that's a good point in terms of once we get it, and I've been harping on this for a number of years, basically discuss the variances and use the terminology of the variance analysis. Yeah, you can start with saying anything over 100,000 or 200,000. Again, I'm picking a number that you could explain or even make it higher. But that's a good point. And I think to me, one of the things we've lacked in the past number of years is exactly that. We've never had the opportunity to have an understanding as to why these variances are occurring or were occurring. There was one year where they completely wiped out.
Like that.
So I don't know, but that's history. Going forward, the point well taken, we can come up with something which gives a threshold and gives us a point to start at to say, okay, we want to look at these particular items because they're above a threshold that we feel we're uncomfortable with. Putting it that way.
Rich,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper's on and Teresa has her hand up.
Hi, Mrs. Cooper. Go ahead, Terry.
Thank you. I like that idea about thresholds, but because numbers change over the years, maybe we should look at it as a percentage, as opposed to hard numbers. Just a
Um,
suggestion.
Yeah, we can. You're right. We can look at it both ways. You can look at something that is increased by 90%, and you're talking about $100. You know what I mean? But but your point's well taken. And it's just a matter of how you want to focus on what the denominator is.
Yeah, what would work? What's the
Yeah,
best, what would work?
exactly. Yep.
You can do both. We can have, over a certain dollar amount and percentage as well.
Yeah. But it's something, if we get to the point where we can at least have numbers that are stable, in terms of the accounting for it, and then we could start deciding it and then getting into the actual understanding of the expenses. I think that would be tremendous progress for us to make. And the quicker we do it, the better off, we are, because budget time is this is November, the end of November is around the corner. As I mentioned before, we're going to be creating a budget that is going to be telling people, where we want to go and where we want to be. But if you don't know where you are, it's kind of hard to get to that point. So that's why time for the essence is to shore this up so that we can have stable situation and footing as to where we stand today, and then project forward is to why we think we need to be here over there tomorrow.
Mr. J, I just want to echo your concerns about voting discrepancies. I think the challenge that we're experiencing from a board standpoint is that we understand that there are voting discrepancies that, you guys have inherited and you're working through and going through, but not having a map ourselves as to, what those discrepancies are. We don't have any sense of sort of where you guys are in the process. So, sitting here and having the meeting, I'm seeing, my notes from last month where we talked about the coding issues causing some discrepancies and that you guys expected them to be corrected by the next cycle. I know not everything goes according to plan. I know sometimes we find things that we didn't see before. So I'm not frustrated about that, but we don't, we're kind of flying in the dark here and we don't have a good sense of what those coding discrepancies, how substantial they are, or sort of where we are in the process of correcting them. So any detail or information you can give us about that is going to help us have a more informed opinion, because at some point, the buck is going to stop. And to Mr. J's point, we're going into the next budget cycle. And I think the challenge is we want to be able to make an educated vote about, how the recommendation coming from the superintendent. And we're not going to be able to do that unless we know that these coding issues are corrected.
Yeah, and to go one step forward, if when you're presenting this to the city, if I were in their part of their team reviewing the statement, one of the questions I would have is to say, okay, where do you stand currently? Show me your statement. And if we show them a statement, and again, this is nothing derogatory relative to this particular month. We understand the issues, but if we were to send a statement out for October, against a projected budget with all of these variances, they'd be scratching their head and be spending months trying to justify. So my only point is time for the essence, and the day-to-day fires you got to put out don't stand still because of issues like this. So somehow we got to weave all this things together, prioritize, what gets done. But in essence, the faster we get these cleaned up, the better off, the better off we are. It's just, and it's the constant thing. We said last year, I remember saying it in May or June, when Mike pretty much completed a lot of his work last year in getting coding. I think it was either May statement or June statement. I remember saying that come July 1st, all this is going to have to be redone because of the applying it against the new budget. And then, the same nonsense starts again. So it's a vicious, reoccurring cycle. And, one of the things that maybe we can look to do is to see how I don't know if there's a system, but how we can cut the man hours necessary to do this, because there's a tremendous amount of time that's expended trying to get all this stuff cleaned up. Mike explained his unhappiness with the system, but yet it's tied into the payroll, but it creates a tremendous amount of man hours to generate a meaningful report that superintendents and the board can understand where the hell they are. But that's something for us to deal with in the future.
One of the things we talked about internally this week was in regards to some state reporting. We have to report out, Human Resources reports out on the various locations where people sit, which wouldn't necessarily reflect in this port because you can see all the locations are set to 0. That's just how the system's set up to summarize the reports. But one of the things we talked about was coming up with a date that we finance and HR and payroll together agreed to as a lockdown date. So, after this date, there are no more moves.
Well,
And I think, at least conceptually, it sounds good.
there's as I said, we're stuck with this particular software. There may be something that you can overlay on top of it that makes your life easy. I come from a world where there was a piece of software called Salesforce. That's the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Yeah.
It was incredible. The power it had was astronomical. The cost was costly, but when you're looking to run your business driven on sales and new customers and repeat business, the front end of that was so powerful that it was just incredible. But in any event, to keep getting back to this, are there any other areas here where you feel you want to discuss? Because, as I said, there's no sense in just repeating the same issues in other categories, whether it be transportation or professional services. So I'll leave it up to you if you just want to conclude and say that, this is a work in progress, and within that period of time that we agreed, it'll be cleaned up and we can have more meaningful conversations.
I think so.
Okay. So why don't we move? One of the things I was happy to see was the issue, the presentation of the Alliance money. Perhaps Tara can talk to that. And it was a nice breakdown the way you sorted it. So
Yeah, if you could, Ken, if you could pull that document up for us.
Yeah.
Yes, that's it. Yep. Yeah. So, when Alliance gets programmed, there's categories of acceptable items, and a good bulk. We've, have a good preponderance of our kindergarten teachers for full day K, bilingual TESOL teachers to support and bolster the services that are required, but also a big strategy that has grown in here is supporting the development of the academy. So we have a lot of high school staff that are in here as well. And so when we open up the academy in particular and increase that Alliance number increased 9 million, a good number of our staff were slid into those slots. So you can see the breakout of personal services or salaries is now at 24 million. Employee benefits that align with the number of staff in the grant is about 7.4. Purchase professional services. We have a lot of our professional learning contracts are in there. Any PD that's scheduled for our literacy programs, numeracy programs, science, K through 12 are in there. Other purchase services would be transportation, Kelly Ed services, so the money that we spend for substitutes, and then supplies are a myriad of anything from iReady to Tyler gets paid out of here, where our financial software system, and all of the schools, textbooks, instructional supplies, licenses, anything that we use for students. So there's a good number bolstered under supplies there. And then property are computers, student devices, headphones, etc. So, we have to submit the Alliance grant in for approval. It goes through a 3 approval process. And then, we come back and we, make sure that the board sees kind of what is in here so that you are fully transparent and aware of the breakdown. The last 2 years, the state, so we had a grand total of 39,478,000. The state has now required us to take any staff that are in the grant and then to designate them by location. So the idea of location is, growing in how we break it out. It used to be I put all the kindergarten teachers in there, 24 kindergarten teachers at such and such salaries added up. And now they want to know, where are the kindergarten teachers? So we have to identify each person by the school that they're from. So the state sees the resources that are identified for each school. But it's tricky because it doesn't reflect, one school is not getting more money than another. For instance, King Street Intermediate may not get as much money as King Street Primary, mostly because King Street Primary has all the kindergarten teachers, and that's what we've chosen to put into the grant. So it's very, we've got other grants, we've got priority grants where we hold all of our alternative staff, our ACE staffing. So they're not well reflected in here, but they're in other places. So the numbers that you see here by school are just how the staffing that are placed in the grant shook out in terms of location. So it's not, don't panic if you see some schools getting more money than the other. It really just depends on the staffing that were selected for the grant and how that accumulated as a total within the overall allocation.
Kara, what's the first line where it's by location? Danbury School District.
So district could be anytime a staff member doesn't have a specific one building. So for instance, we could have a staff member like a coach or a student support specialist or an art teacher, anybody who is considered a program, department heads, anybody who services more than one building gets listed under district. So there's a lot of those that people who are part of more than one building.
And this includes
supervisors.
This includes salaries, benefits, transportation stuff. When you
correct.
Up, yeah.
Correct. And yeah, supervisors, anybody, like I said, anybody who oversees a program beyond one location.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask one other question for clarity. The $39 million is when it's presented or at this particular point. Is that number, best way I can say, let's take the category of salaries and compare it to our actual budget. When you make when you forecast your budget any year or as you will be doing, you will include in your budget the potential need for certain positions, which will increase your budget number. In terms of the alliance money, that's 39 million. Does this include potential hiring, or is it actual people that is staffed at this particular point? You know,
It's a great question. It's a great question. So, if right now there's a little bit of both. So you can have, because we turn over in the summer. I could have a chemistry teacher. Let's say the chemistry teacher at Danbury High School is named, Jill Smith. Jill Smith leaves us over the summer. Right now, I have Jill Smith's salary in Alliance at TBD until we hire a person to backfill, and then that person gets entered in. Those are additional changes that need to happen. In some cases, so if we, for instance, if we'd like to hire cadre subs to release teachers so that you can work together, and we wanted to put, hire 10 of these types of positions as substitutes to come in and help to work with our teachers, they may not be named yet because they haven't been hired yet, or their money goes to a purchase and professional service line because it's a sub line. So there can be TBDs in here because the position, someone vacates the position at the time that the grant gets written or shortly after, and then we hire someone and slide them back in. Where the grants get tricky, where we have to keep an eye on things and where we have to do revisions from time to time, is if people who leave after the start of the school year, after the grant gets approved, we have to make sure that they get, as we rehire, that people get coded properly back into the grant, not into general fund, but also that those salaries get utilized. So if we've got 3, 4, 5 positions in the grant that remain persistently vacant, then that money, we have to respond to that and we have to do a revision. So, okay, well, we could take the remainder of that money and ask the state if we can buy more computers with it for the students, or put it towards professional learning for the teachers, and they'll approve it and let us know if we can do those revisions. So those are kind of ongoing monitoring that we have to do kind of on a quarterly basis.
I guess the big picture is the $39 million would be a fixed number at this point, because I don't believe that number is going to increase anymore. Is that correct?
That is the fear.
Right.
Yes.
Now, that being an assumption, going forward to next year and the following year, but we've got $24 million for the schedule for that salary. You can say, put 4% on top of that, hypothetically,
Correct.
just as an inflation or
Yeah.
raise situation. Where does that money come from? If
General fund.
okay, that's what we're getting at. If there is no fact, and use no word, in this fund to utilize or to carry over to apply against that cost for next year, plus the cost of bringing in another grade level into the school next year.
Right.
I'm not sure, maybe I phrased that wrong. The fact that we're going to move in another grade level, would I be correct in saying a good part of the staff would already be existing to move over, or would that necessitate an infusion of new hires?
Yeah, so I'm working with Dan Donovan on that now. So he's trying to cast out and project, and he's going through his open positions that he currently has to assess the need, and then accounting for positions that we've had to overage because we had persistent vacancies. And so after we do that, we'll project out exactly how many additional new teachers we may need, because we're now split campuses. So you lose some economy by being on 2 campuses, but where we'll have to add is in more on the operational side. So if you're opening up another grade level, we may need another, some of the secretarial staff that will need to round out a full-size building, potentially some administrative staff. So there'll be a little bit of teaching, a little bit of operation, a little bit of administrative staff that need to go over there. Remains to be seen about the transportation. That will be dictated by the runs and where the buses need to go across the city with the new mix of kids. I think, that should be relatively incremental, because you really are moving most of the kids as opposed to, adding more students in that are net new. These are students that exist. So will be a reconfiguration of the runs again. And there may be some additional busing that's needed as a result of that. So those are ongoing, very big, meaty conversations that we're having now. But in terms of this grant here, because it's so big and because we anticipate that we will not get an increase, or at least that's the word on the street, is that I can tell you all the urban superintendents are beating the street to talk to legislators on this issue right now. We have formed a group and we'll be submitting a letter out. And I'll update the board on Monday with this information. It's on the agenda. That we are advocating at least for a cost of living or an inflationary formula to stay current with this ECS. This is an ECS formula for us, so it needs to be reflective of the realities, in the community. We're hold harmless on this number. This number won't go backwards, even if we lose students. But our concern is that it won't increase. And the last thing I'll say about it, not to belabor it, is that there is some cushion in here. I am anticipating this problem for us, and some of the extra sub time, PLC time, things that we're trying to do, that we've built in here to do some extra additional work with teachers, release time, some extra learning, professional learning that we might not have had access to, have been built in as sort of a pocket, if you will, of one time, as opposed to packing this with more staff, and then having to lay those staff off because we can't keep up with the increase.
So to your point, in using your terminology, the cushion or fat, once that drops off, whatever that number is can be used to apply simplistically against the cost of living if there's no adjustments by the state.
Correct. It will at least offset it or mitigate it. Correct.
Right. Okay. So the rest of the board
Jay,
members.
sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Juanita has her hand up, please.
Okay, just 1 minute, Juanita. The rest of the board members, this is a potential problem or something that we should just note in the future, that we don't want to get stuck with a cost like this where it runs away, and that cushion or buffer or fat, if it's not there, then this particular cost center has to be funded from the general fund. So and that's the basic reason I brought this up here. So it makes it a little clearer. Juanita, go ahead.
Thank you. For Kara, Kara, when the Alliance breakdown, I see it by locations.
Yes.
Can you tell me where on these locations we would find ACE or our Reach and Endeavor?
Sure. So as part of the Alliance application, there's a separate component. We're also considered a priority school district, and one of the priority categories for spending the money that we receive in that grant is for alternative education strategies. And so our alternative programming, if you will, the staffing and resources are in that grant, not this particular facing grant for Alliance. It's in priority. So that's right. There's some other grants where, it's heavier and certain based on what the grant can be used for. We program, kind of divide and conquer and program appropriately, which is why you don't see ACE on here, because I have them largely squarely in the priority grant. And same thing with Reach and Endeavor. A lot of also considered alternative, and their instructional supplies. But all schools have instructional supplies in this account. We have a nice sum of the supplies that all schools have access to. But in terms of the staffing and where you see the staffing, that's in our priority because it's designated for alternative education supports.
all this brings out is the complexity that goes into the accounting for the district. As you're talking, I'm thinking, gee, if I were a medical student and had a cadaver, you'd look at it and say, okay, this is neurology and this is, cardiology and this is, whatever else it is. The complexity, as you just reiterated and answered to Juanita, it's just amazing. And then compounding not only the understanding on a higher level putting in, but then the detail to get those costs from a payroll system into these particular cost centers is enormous. So I just wanted to bring that out to let the committee members understand how much work is involved to get what we're looking for. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. The tremendous amount of details and transactions you've got to do from a simple payroll as to where to put that particular person. It's like crossing over railroad tracks and crossings. It's just unreal.
Mr. J, Teresa has her hand up, please.
Go ahead, Gary.
Thank you. The supply figure, I think I mentioned this before. One of the main questions I got, why is the school asking parents to bring supplies in? And that's a lot of money. There is $3 million, and how is it allocated? I mean, is it fairly? Is it one pool? I thought years ago it was a budget went to each school. But why are teachers asking for supplies? Well, we got so much money here.
Yeah. So there's school account. So in addition to what you see here, each school has a supply line out of the general fund. Can you hear me okay? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay. I made some adjustments and I wasn't sure if my volume was still on. And then a lot of the supplies that are in Alliance. So a supply could be anything from a box of folders or paper for the school system. It could be markers. It could be a digital textbook. So that goes in a supply line. So many of our texts now, AP texts, access to all types of student databases and platforms, actually, when they're individual licenses, they actually are coded on the supply line because it's an individual student directed material. And so all kinds of things go in there. PSAT, testing supplies, everything. So it's not all just, the folders that the kids need and the markers and the pencils. There's a lot of our, it supports a lot of our databases, assessment systems. Assessment systems go on the supply line, surprisingly, right? So our iReady assessment systems go on there. MyPath assessment systems,
Wow.
our ERLA, yeah, it all goes on there. So but that said, we have been really, really conscientious about taking care of supplies when requests come in. And so, but sometimes, and I was a classroom teacher as well. And, we always had a little classroom contribution to help bolster ongoing supplies because you do go through a lot of them. But, if anybody really needs something, they just need to reach out. And we've been able to really take care of folks and replenish instruments, materials, you name it. So I think we've been in the best shape we've ever been with regards to those items.
So, so then the schools don't get a light item supply budget. It comes still through the central office.
So it depends on the supplies. So if for the art supplies for the art program, for example, it makes a lot more sense for us to buy them wholesale in large quantities and distribute to the schools enough to satisfy what the art program calls for, right? They still get some supplemental things. There's still discretionary funding in those supply lines, but they should have enough to implement the program because we do take care of that. If people want to go above and beyond and add additional items that's if the school has some leftover money or student activities, I'm sure that they do that. But in general, we supply the items that are needed for the for the curriculum. Anything kind of beyond that, incidentals, yeah, special projects.
Thank you.
Yep, of course.
Kara, if you don't spend any of the money in the Alliance, whatever you don't spend, is that something that you could bank and use it again at your discretion?
No,
No?
no, that's the hard part, is that it's use it or lose it. And, you know, that's why the kind of the accounting on it. And I think in the last 2 years, we've been a lot better on it, but you know, things happen. You know, materials don't come in on time before June 30th. And, you know, all of a sudden that money now is, you know, is kind of left on the books. And that happens because we're a large district, and there's, you know, supply chain interruption and problems and things like that. For the most part, in the last, you know, 2 years, we've gotten a lot better at making sure that the grant is charged appropriately and that it's on time.
Do they give you a period of time to adjust for it, or does it come at the end of the?
I think we have to submit everything for reimbursement. So if I write in there that we're going to spend money on 600 student laptops, we have to submit for a reimbursement. We have to spend the money first and submit for reimbursement.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, which makes things challenging.
Yeah, particularly if you have no money to begin with.
Yeah,
I guess
right.
you got the big credit debt until you pay it off.
Yeah, so you kind of have to be working with a cushion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. To any other committee members, do you have any? I want to thank you first for,
Mrs. Cooper's hand is up. Sorry, Rich.
yeah, for your work on it. I think it's very meaningful. Mrs. Cooper, go ahead.
While we're on this discussion, and I don't want to belabor this, I want to know from the superintendent, because I've heard it this summer past, if a particular group is raising money, say like for Broadview, a donation, who presents that, or do you know that is happening as superintendent?
Well, I should know. So if the donation is being made, if the PTO is fundraising on behalf of the school, then that goes through the student activity and the school.
Okay.
Okay. If someone wants to make outside of that system, if somebody wants to make a donation to the school, right? Like similar to the Rogers Park, someone is donating $5,000, you know, outside of a GoFundMe establishment, that should come to the board and be appropriately accounted for, so that, you know, we should know what's being donated and who's donating it and who benefits by it. We should, that should be transparent to the school system.
Okay.
If that's not happening, then, you know, someone needs to give me a little call, and we'll make sure that starts happening in some places.
Okay, thank you. And follow up, that will answer my question. If a group wants to donate a particular book to the schools, or, you know, that should come before you or the board.
So the donation isn't the issue. I would say what book, why,
What, right. Mhm.
yeah,
Okay.
and what's in it, and we'd want to review that.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
course.
Thank you, Rich.
Okay. Do any committee members have any more comments relative to the Alliance? If not, we can move on to the next schedule, which was sent to us this evening. I'm not sure if everybody received it or opened it up, but Mike, do you want to talk to that, or Angela?
Oh, that's the closing schedule, Mike.
The schedule of, right. So thank you for preparing this. For some time, you know, we've been asking for a schedule so that board members, both new as well as vintage, have an idea as to what the requirements or obligations are of the district, you know, whether it be state, local, federal, or even just monthly to get closing schedules done. The reason I thought of that was to avoid the situation of, oh, we forgot an audit for this particular year or last year. And so if we had a schedule that shows what the obligations are and the frequency of them, at least if at the end of the month, all those obligations that are satisfied in the month, when a financial statement is prepared, could be said, the finance director could just say, all of the closing schedules were met, period. And we just put a chapter on that, rather than do anything else. One of the things we could do here to improve it is to just sort this by the timing. So if there's, if it's monthly or quarterly or annually or whatever it is, so that you can just see what buckets they fall in. But, we can play with the presentation on this. I think this is a good beginning, and I want to thank you for, for the schedule. To me, it's important.
Excuse me, Rich.
Yeah.
Will we receive a copy of this? I did not get one.
It was sent out this afternoon late, so it was, I think Kara P had included it with,
Can you have, can you have that resent, please?
yeah, sure.
And I had trouble opening up the links.
Yeah. In terms of, let's say next month, what we'd look to do is to have, once we resort this, we'll have this part of the printed package next month. So you'll have a hard copy as well. But in the interim, if you didn't get copies, I'll just talk to Kara and make sure that she distributes it. Okay?
Rich, I also created, I don't know if you want me to just share really quick. It's kind of just a blank calendar schedule by month. So I can take these individual items and drop them in by month. If it's annually, it would be, in there only once. If it was monthly, it would be monthly. So there's actually a calendar we could look at, and it would be closing day 1, closing day 2, closing day 3, so on and so forth.
It's just, we don't know, without having a checkbox here, which I don't want to get into. I think it's just, the part of the statement would be at the end of the month, all closing dates were met in accordance with the schedule or calendar, provided. Case in point, come the end of the year, sending out your W-2s and all the reconciliations. Again, it's just up to you to alert us that, the particular functions were done. I'm not interested in seeing every month that this is checked off, but that's your job. It's not my job. We just want to make sure that, we get a statement that says that we're current in terms of our closing, so that we don't go back and repeat the situation we had the audit where nobody knew it was due and nobody knew it was, was delinquent. Again, it's new and we can work on improving it, to see how it can have this good working tool. Is that being said, are there any other questions any committee members or non-committee members have regarding this particular meeting? Oh, and also, I'm going to beat Kate to the punch. Do we have to take a motion we should take a motion to present these statements to the board for acceptance, correct, Kate?
So moved.
Okay, thank you. Teresa, can I have a second?
Second,
Thank you. Who is that, Kate?
Julie.
That was Julie.
Oh, hi, Julie. Thank you.
Aye.
Okay. Good. All right. That being said, Kate, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn at 7:11. And I want to thank everybody for your participation. Appreciate it.
I want to say thank you, everybody. This is my last meeting.
Thank you,
Happy
Teresa.
Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Teresa.
I will say the
It's been a
same
pleasure,
thing.
everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Likewise.
Thanksgiving.
Happy
Thank you.
Thanksgiving to everybody. This will be my last meeting as well. So enjoy your holidays. And I don't know, we'll see you around.
Yeah.
Right.
Stay in touch.